Welcome to Curious City, the podcast from Glasgow Life Museums. And here's how it works. In each episode, we head out into Glasgow, discovering the stories that surround us. Who knows what we'll discover this time? I'm Jade Graham, the Programme Manager at Kelvin Hall. And in this episode, we're going to look behind the scenes at Kelvin Hall and unearth some of our hidden histories. If you don't know, Kelvin Hall is a multi-purpose venue and home to a vast range of collections from Glasgow Life Museums, the Hunterian Art Gallery Museum and the National Library of Scotland's Moving Image and Sound Archives. This busy building also serves as a Glasgow club sport facility with sports halls, studios, gym, gymnastics, soft play and clip and climb. As well as that, we have the Kelvin Centre for Textile Conservation, BBC Studios and learning spaces for the University of Glasgow. We're over twice as large as the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, and we use this space well to accommodate all of these partnerships and facilities. We'll be finding out more about some of the collections housed at Kelvin Hall as we make our way along the main avenue, and we'll discover more about how Kelvin Hall offers access to collections, temporary displays, teaching and research. There's a lot to discover, so let's get started. Our guests this week all play a part in keeping Kelvin Hall alive for its 500,000 visitors every year. And what better way to get us started than meeting Douglas Logan, who's been a volunteer tour guide with Kelvin Hall since we reopened in 2016. Douglas and the brilliant volunteer team offer free tours every Saturday morning. Hello, Douglas.
Hello, Jade.
So we're walking along the avenue and we've stopped at the timeline, which is part of your tour. Could you tell us a wee bit about the history of the building?
The first photo on the timeline shows the construction of this building in 1926. It replaces a building that was burnt down in 1925. It was built only in 1918. There is a film of this happening which shows the Argyle Street outside absolutely full of people with fire hoses being dragged out by the general public into the centre of the street. And it also shows lots of people standing on the sort of slope up to the art gallery watching what was going on. The buildings in Blantyre Street, the tenements, were actually damaged by the fire. So there may have been evacuees out on the street watching their houses being damaged by the flames. But that is what was happening in 1925.
Do we know what started the fire in 1925, Douglas?
I haven't a clue. But it certainly was well ablaze before the fire brigade got here, and the building was obviously reduced to ashes.
One of the things I find really interesting, Douglas, is the fact that we have that on film at the National Library of Scotland. Now, there weren't roving film crews going around, so it's a really interesting story, I think, about why that film crew were out and filmed this.
Well, it was a Pathy news crew that were out. I think they must have had a resident crew in Glasgow who just looking for events and came out when they heard the building was on fire.
Apparently, it wasn't Pathy News. Glasgow used to be known as Cinema City because there's more cinemas in Glasgow than anywhere outside America at the time. And there were actually people that used to have the screenings. They used to go and film people in the street with a big advert saying, if you want to see yourself on the big screen, come to like the Corky or whatever cinema it was. And they were going out doing an advertising piece, recording people in the street, and they just so happened to come across a fire.
Right.
Do you not think, Douglas, from doing these tours for the last 8 years, that you find out new things all the time from people joining the tours?
You learn as much on a tour sometimes as you're actually telling people.
So as we move up the timeline, Douglas, let's move up to like the 60s. You can let us know what some of the things that were going on at Kelvin Hall then.
The 60s is a big era for concerts, and there were lots of concerts. I don't even know how many there was. One of the guests one time told me that they'd been to a concert with Leonard Cohen, but I still haven't found any reference to that anywhere. But I'm quite prepared to believe there was a Leonard Cohen concert.
So what were the big concerts from the 60s, 70s, Douglas?
Well, the one that's most well known is the one that's the album cover, which is on the timeline, which is the Kinks live at Kelvin Hall. That was April the 1st, 1967. The Kinks album, which they recorded here, has an enormous amount of crowd noise in it. Recording techniques must have moved on a lot since that album was made.
So they maybe enjoyed the adulation of the crowds, the famous Glasgow crowds at Kelvin
yes,
Hall?
you should hear the noise. Yes, I think the Kinks must have loved the noise from the crowd. Another interesting one is in 1964. Lulu did a concert here. She had just released Shout, which was her first top 10 hit. You could have gone along to that concert in 1964 and paid on the night and paid £5 for your ticket, which is 25 pence.
So this is part of, when you're offering the Saturday morning free tours, this is part of the tour?
Yes, it certainly is, yes.
So once you've done the timeline tour and talked about the history of the building, where else do you take our guests?
After the timeline, we go on down into the lobby area of the Kelvin Hall and on into the stores to take people to look at all the material that's stored in the Glasgow Life stores, which have about 150,000 items there, so probably quite a lot for people to look at.
That's us today, Douglas. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks for volunteering at Kelvin Hall. We're really grateful.
Thank you very much, and I hope more people come along and enjoy the tour.
Now that we're deep inside the building, our next stop along the avenue brings us to one of two large glass windows which look into the Glasgow Life Museum store. And here we find Heather Robertson, the Transport and Technology Curator. Can you describe what this room looks like and what it's for?
Yeah, hi Jade. So we're in a really large space full of electronic racking. The racking spans almost the entire length of the room, from floor to not far off the ceiling height. And just glancing around, you can see 3 big jukeboxes, a piano, a very cool 1960s bright orange ball chair, and some amazing stone carvings, and there's so much more. So there's plenty you can see straight away, and then thousands of smaller objects carefully wrapped up in boxes that we can bring out for people. It allows people access to see everything from furniture to musical instruments, history, technology, archaeology, education, and Charles Rennie Mackintosh original designs and room settings.
So Heather, why are all these objects here? Why aren't they out on open display?
Only 2% of our collections are on display at any one time, and the rest are in stores. But all museums in the UK are the same, so on average between 2 and 20% of objects displayed in museums, and the rest are all in stores. And that's because a lot of museum collections are vast and they've been amassed over decades, so museum buildings would have to be absolutely mammoth to display them all. So the majority of museums aren't able to allow access to stores for a variety of reasons, so it's quite exciting for people to come here and see what a wide variety of things we actually have. And the wealth of diverse objects means that we can change the displays in our venues, send objects away for external loans, and carry out regular conservation procedures that are really important to maintain objects in good condition. And we have regular visits from researchers, community groups and schools, and we offer regular tours that anyone can book on.
Do you have any objects within the stores that are particular favourites of yours, Heather?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to cheat a little bit, so I've got 2 sort of interrelated objects that I love, if that's okay. And they both relate to Glasgow's Institute for the Blind, and they're from the 1830s. So the first is a large Gospel of St John that's what's referred to as angular character for the blind. And the introductory pages in black print include lists of donors and subscribers who gave money for the production of the volume. And it's dated 20th October 1834. The Gospel itself is embossed using a really angular font that looks almost like code, but it's actually a very stylised English alphabet. And it's described in the introduction as this rude triangular alphabet. It's a brilliant contrast to the other object. That's a printing plate depicting a raised alphabet with the legend Asylum for the Blind 1841 at the bottom. So basically, a Glasgow man called John Alston developed a method of printing books for blind people in the 1830s and 40s. He was the director of Glasgow's Asylum for the Blind, and his printing system differed from the widely used Hoy system. And you're going to have to forgive my pronunciation here because all of these names I've only ever read. But yeah, so his system differed from the widely used Hoy system because the letters were far more simplified without serifs. So Alston's, he printed the entire Bible using this method, and it was 19 extremely large volumes. And a man named Defoe, he saw them and he was really impressed. And Defoe was the assistant director of the school where Louis Braille stayed when he saw the Bible. So later on, Defoe became the director of that school, and he insisted that everyone in the school use John Alston's system, so this Glasgow guy's system of printing. So that means that Louis Braille was taught using it. So Braille had already developed his much superior dot system, and because it gave the students independence and a quick and easy way of communicating with one another that was difficult for the teachers to understand, Defoe burned any books he found that were printed or hand transcribed in Louis Braille's dots. He also made sure it wouldn't be used again by confiscating all the slates and styli that allowed the boys to use it. But, unsurprisingly, the boys rebelled and managed to communicate using Braille despite Defoe, and the rest is history. So our printing plate then is an example of the Alston method of printing for blind people that was used in the school where Louis Braille was taught, and the angular gospel is a precursor to that, showing all the experimental attempts at creating books that blind people could read. But as with most things, the best person to come up with a good workable system was a blind person, rather than a sighted people trying to create a system without any lived experience to draw on.
Now, you're giving us this wee talk just now, but once a month we do something called Twilight Tours at Kelvin Hall. So we have curators like Heather who will come from 5:15 to 6 o'clock, so you can come after work and before your dinner. And we have behind the scenes talks in Glasgow Life Museums and the Hunterian stores, which are curator led. Heather, are there more places in Glasgow where the collection is stored, and can people go there and visit too?
Yeah, absolutely. So we also have Glasgow Museum's Resource Centre in Nits Hill. It's got 17 purpose-built and environmentally controlled storage pods, and these house around 1.4 million objects. And again, anyone can book onto a tour or request to see a specific object.
Great to see Heather there and discover all about Glasgow Museum's collection here at Kelvin Hall. So the next person on our journey along the avenue is Katie Strang, the Hunterian Curator of Mineralogy and Petrology. Katie, we've stopped here at the Hunterian display. Can you tell us a bit about what you do here and the Hunterian collection itself?
Yeah, so I look after the collection of rocks and minerals that we have here at the Hunterian, which includes well over 100,000 different samples. And my job is to make sure they're well looked after and in the right place, but also to make them accessible so that people can come and look at those, and researchers can undertake work on those specimens as well. And also to uncover the kind of histories and the hidden narratives that are in those collections, particularly with relation to things like the legacy of empire.
And this current display looks at some of the hidden histories and unsung heroes of geology. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, so geology as a subject studies a really diverse range of things, from climate change, loads of earth processes, but unfortunately is one of the worst subjects when it comes to diversity. And this exhibition is looking at the hidden histories of women throughout geology, because historically a lot of the stories of geology are told through the narratives of men. And within the Hunterian collections themselves, we have a lot of material that has been collected and curated by females who have kind of been forgotten to history. So we worked with a group of volunteers to research, look at archives, and sort of bring to life those stories of women who have been absolutely vital to contributing to our understanding and knowledge of Scotland's geology.
How long is the display going to stay? I believe it's to International Women's Day next March, is that right?
Yeah, so the display will be in Kelvin Hall until the end of March 2025, which times in nicely for International Women's Day.
So Katie, finally, what's your favourite thing about working with the collections here at Kelvin Hall? Is it a specific object, or is it the collection itself as a whole?
I think it's probably the collection itself as a whole, but also the kind of communities and the individuals that I get to speak to try and understand the context of those objects better. It's always really exciting getting to speak to, people, particularly communities of Glasgow, and getting to grips with what it is that they feel about the collections. And also, I really love rocks, so it's great fun just being able to go and look at lots of really, really beautiful mineral samples and rock samples.
So Katie, as well as the Family Day, I believe you're doing a lot of other sort of community connections over the next year or so. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so doing a lot of outreach work through the Hunt area, and also working alongside the Scottish Geology Trust with the Geology Festival. And we have regular events such as GeoNatter, which everyone is welcome to come along to, and they're based here in Kelvin Hall.
And you can find out more about GeoNatter online. It meets every 2 weeks here at Kelvin Hall. So all of this information is on our website. Katie, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, so we've walked down to the very end of the avenue here at Kelvin Hall, and our final stop of the day is the National Library of Scotland Access Centre. And here we meet Liam Patterson, who's the Assistant Curator here at the National Library of Scotland. Liam, can you tell us a wee bit about what happens here at the Access Centre?
The centre is open to the public on Tuesdays through to Saturday, and you can come in here and you can watch literally thousands of films of, showing Scotland's past, Scotland's history. And we also have a lot of e-resources from the National Library of Scotland that you can access through there, but you can now access through here in Glasgow as well.
Can you tell us a wee bit about what hidden gems you've unearthed for us today?
Yep, I've been looking into the idea recently of the earliest colour film of Scotland in our collections, and the film I'm looking at first of all is a film called Where the Bend Stands Sentinel. This was made by a guy called Ronnie Jay. He was a prominent figure in the early Scottish film industry. He ran Jay's screen services in Glasgow. He made industrial, commercial films, but he also made family films and personal interest films. So this film is a complete edited production, and it's about a hosteling holiday by car up to Wester Ross, a bunch of chaps in the early 30s. So I'm now looking, do we have anything earlier than that? Could we have something going back into the 20s? And I think there's a few in the collection that are, and I'd just like to try and find out what's the earliest. On the technical front, first of all, these films that I'm looking at are filmed in Kodacolour format. And this was introduced in 1928 by Eastman Kodak. It's a kind of footery film format because you needed a special lens attachment, red, green and blue, when you were filming it, and then when you were projecting it as well. So yeah, a bit footery to use. It didn't last long because Kodachrome film came in the mid-1930s, and that kind of kicked it out the park because Kodachrome was much better quality, much easier to use. So Kodacolour ended fairly quickly. First possible contender for earlier is 1929, a film called Grousing Scotland, 1929. Does what it says in the tin. It says summer 1929 on the film can, so it's pretty definite. This was made by an American tourist called Paul Hyde Bonner. He was a banker, a diplomat, a writer, all sorts of things. He was on holiday in Britain, and some of the footage came up here for shooting and fishing, probably. And some of the footage was filmed in Haddington and Lennoxlove Castle, in and around there. So that's a possible contender. Another one is another Kodacolour film, Unveiling of the Bruce and Wallace statues, Edinburgh Castle. Now, this is interesting because we have a definite date for this one. It's 29th of May 1929, because it was the 600th anniversary of this event. There's a newspaper article to back that up, so it's the only definite date we have. Was there anything earlier than 1929? Possibly yes, and this could come back to Ronnie Jay again, who started it, because I've been working on a collection of his films recently, and it's more the family films that he did. There's one in particular, there's footage of Prestwick Open Air Swimming Pool, really busy, lovely summer's day, and also footage of thatched houses at Fortingall in Perthshire. And I've given this a date of around 1928 at the moment.
Is there a way for members of the public to access these films online?
That's on our website. The website is movingimage.nls.uk.
The National Library, do we offer much public programmes so that people can come in and connect with any of your content?
Got a kind of ongoing selection of film showings and talks, usually on Wednesday nights. It's our late opening night, so look at the website again to see what's on at any given time.
That's it for this episode of Curious City, which today has seen us explore Kelvin Hall. Huge thanks to Douglas, Heather, Katie and Liam for inviting us in and talking us through their experiences of the place. See See you next time on Curious City.